Hi, welcome to the Business Class ESL Breakroom. We're a company of passionate language trainers and coaches. We're here to share ideas to improve our skills and strengthen the training community. Follow us on Instagram at business_class_language and subscribe to the ESL Breakroom playlist on Spotify, Deezer, or Apple Music for new episodes. Hi, and welcome to the ESL Breakroom. Today's episode has us visiting with Meri Maroutian, who is an English language teacher and an equity advocate. She's based in Italy, and she's here to explain to us what an equity advocate is in terms of native speakerism. So we're going to be talking about what it's like to be an English teacher or trainer who's not a native speaker and what that could mean in terms of work opportunities, etc. So, Meri, welcome and thank you for making the time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Good. So, sorry, there seems to be a little bit of a lag, but that's okay. We'll work with it. So, if you could tell us, for some of us who've never heard the term equity advocate, what does that mean for you?
Well, it's not like a full-time occupation for me. It's more like someone who always speaks about or talks about, the hiring practices that are unequal for English language teachers out there. So equity obviously means like we're in the pursuit of finding equal rights and equal treatment for English language teachers out there. And unfortunately, native speakerism is an ideology that has radicated and is radicated deeply in the English language teaching industry, where, native speakers are perceived as better models or better teachers. And so what I do with being an equity advocate is that I go to conferences and in my daily life, I address these issues and I speak about it from my own point of view, being a non-native speaker and an English teacher, and I raise awareness on why it is a discriminatory practice to have a preference for native versus non-native teachers, which is really basically a social construct. It doesn't even need to exist. There is no or which side are you on? It's more we're on the same side, but let's take a look at, how this ideology and this pervasive, stereotype and systemic bias is holding us back from doing our jobs, basically.
Excellent. Absolutely. And I like how you say, we're on the same side. And, what can we do as an industry as a whole, so both native speakers and non-native trainers and teachers together, to combat that?
Yes, because no one is actually, superior or inferior. It's just a perception that people might have. And obviously it goes well into, the accent and the pronunciation problem. But there is really an issue with identity and how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. And so it's based on, some people having imposter syndrome, some people having, I'll make a clear example, right? If I am Armenian, and I am, so English shouldn't be my first language. And I am not a native speaker. And once you are not born in an English-speaking country, you're simply excluded from that. But where you are born, I think we can all agree, doesn't define how good we can become or how good we can be as teachers, as professionals, because we are not born into an occupation, right? So it's just this crazy idea that really stays with you, and you can be a non-native teacher as well and still feel that you're not good enough. So it can be, self-inflicted as well, and your belief about how good you could be or how well you can serve others can be very limited just because you believe yourself that you won't ever be as capable as a native speaker, because that's really what the advertisements around us say. That's what hiring practices are. Globally, speaking of hiring practices, they determine who gets hired, and a lot of requisites and a lot of requirements really state that they only prefer native speakers to apply. And so that's where I come in, and I try to point it out that this is discriminatory, and many people like me are fighting this on a daily basis. But it takes a lot of confidence and a lot of work to kind of get into that and advocate for equal rights and equal opportunities, because obviously there is a system in place that helps this narrative be, you know, perpetuated and kept alive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like on a national level or international level, what can be done, or what are some things that are being done to change perceptions? I mean, are people going to the EU Parliament, or I don't.
Well, I can tell you that I have looked into that. And obviously, since a lot of things have changed, and not long ago, but not, you know, that recently. So CEFR descriptors have been changed, and native speaker level has been taken out of some of the descriptors, you know, acknowledging the fact that, you know, intelligibility and, you know, communication skills are to be found relevant, important, and, you know, we shouldn't have biases towards accents. But still, in a way, like if you try to fight it, if you try to, let's say, report a discriminatory case and say, you know, this school does not allow, well, there are things in place. There is the Article of Basic Human Rights, in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, Article 21 states that you shouldn't discriminate against, you know, language, racial minorities, and all these things. And also place of birth. You shouldn't categorize people whether they're good or bad, you know, because of where they were born. However, then, you know, there are a lot of loopholes in the system. So people might say, okay, but it doesn't discriminate one particular nationality. If an advertisement is looking for simply native speakers, it's not really discriminated towards one specific nationality. And that makes it very hard to, let's say, win a case. However, legally speaking, you know, there have been cases, or there have been very few cases, and some are still, you know, in the process of getting acknowledged, where if you have something in writing that definitely, like from a language school, saying that they're not hiring you based off of that, then you can legally take action. And because it is illegal, at least in Europe it is, but in other places I'm not aware that any of these practices are deemed to be, you know, illegal and persecuted by law, let's put it this way.
That's what I gathered from some of the research I've been doing, that it's much more pervasive in other parts of the world. So do you describe that Europe compared to Asia or other continents, what's happening?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think it's more blatant in Southeast Asia, in Japan, in Korea, where there are, you know, teacher assistance schemes or this type of programs that privilege native speakers only, and they do it really, you know, obviously and in the open, because they can, and they don't see anything wrong with that type of mentality. Whereas I think the ELT industry within Europe as well, I think it's tiptoeing around the topic a lot. I mean, it is a hot topic, it is a trending topic, and it will continue to be. But it's really, they're tiptoeing around it because they're talking about, you know, lingua franca, and yes, you know, accent reduction, and how that is bad, how to conserve one's identity, how to, you know, be more inclusive towards other nationalities, but that's where it sort of stops. It never goes, you know, in the I'm you know, very careful and cautious when I use this word, but it's very racist, and that's not something that the English language teaching industry wants to admit. But, you know, speakerhood, similarly to race, is not a biological trait. It's a socially constructed trait, and linguistically speaking, there are no grounds to maintain this distinction. But then it's, you know, what we look like or how we sound like really plays a big part in how we are judged. So it's really, you know, it goes into racism rather than, you know, your ability to be a teacher. And we have to, it's not an easy term to deal with, I think, as educators, especially.
Absolutely, the elephant in the room, but it has to be said. Of course.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And you're based in Italy. Do you feel this on a day-to-day, or do you see differences?
Yes, I do. I feel it from day to day, but I've always addressed and been open about it. And I think that there is a misconception where people think that by you know, openly stating that they are against this practices, that something bad might happen, or that you might be called out, or people won't see you in the same way. But actually, I've had quite positive, responses to my way of thinking. And a lot of people that I know, and native speaker colleagues and non-native speaker colleagues, have really, hopped on board with the idea and have educated themselves and have had an open mind to understand that this is really negative for the whole profession. And so, you get asked a lot, like, what nationality are you? And that is asked not, I call it a microaggression already, because as an English teacher, people expect you to answer, with a city that is associated to, the English culture or the American culture. And that's really where it stops. So they do realize that when someone is, not represented or not deemed good enough simply because of their nationality, that it is wrong. And when you start talking about it more openly and saying, hey, I don't feel like, and sometimes, language and culture really go together. And sometimes I don't feel comfortable putting those two things together because I haven't been brought up in an English speaking culture per se. I've only lived in environments or in countries that spoke, that the official language, I would say, was English for about 3 years. And I'm now currently 36. So I can tell you a lot about a variety of cultures. I couldn't even have a lesson personally on my own culture. I was only 6 when I became an expat.
Wow.
So yeah, I feel like it's, there are a lot of discussions to be had on this, like what is culture and how much it influences, and why when I have to speak in English, I have to, cover that area myself, because I don't think you are, again, born into culture and culture just inherently because you've lived and breathed the air of a country or of a city.
Right.
Your knowledge can still be very limited depending on the person. If you're curious, if you're not so curious in your own culture, then the levels, I think, vary pretty much.
Fascinating discussion, because I have a friend who's a third culture kid who left one country, lived in another country, was different from her parents, and people say, well, aren't you such and such? Because her name is, and she's from this country. She's like, yeah, but I never really lived there. I don't know. She grew up in Southeast Asia and traveled, and it's all it depends on your experience.
Absolutely.
So, amazing. Wow. And so what would you recommend how do we approach that topic, I guess, with, for example, our colleagues who might be in your situation, non-natives? What can we do to be more inclusive or more helpful even in the work environment?
Well, things like, I feel like sometimes non-native teachers are excluded from teaching certain levels or certain content because they're deemed not fit or not able to. And what happens is sometimes we also feel like we are not apt to do a certain task because, we've always been excluded from it. So first of all, and also, whether it's a director of study, a school, a language school, I think we shouldn't place teachers to a certain group or a certain level simply because they're native or non-native, giving advanced classes to native speakers and vice versa. I don't think that is a good way to go about it, because you are basically confirming this ideology that you believe to be true. So, just being more inclusive in that and being more aware of actually what a teacher can do and what each teacher can bring to the table. And one might be more fit to do one thing. I'm not saying, it's an exclusive thing, or you should only give the higher classes to non-native. No, I think it varies from situation to situation. But what I hear, what happens most frequently is that, or normally with non-native speakers, sometimes we are told not to ever speak any other language except for, the target language for the students. And the same, kind of rigid scheme is not asked of native speakers. And it's like, you are
Really?
not supposed to show because, oh, it would be, you speak Italian, don't ever use Italian, because a native speaker, wouldn't have that same treatment. And I find it a bit alarming when that happens, because, in an L2 English language classroom, you might need to use students L1, and that can help in a lot of ways. Whereas sometimes it's like a forbidden, the forbidden fruit, never go there.
Yeah.
And so this type of treatment, that is specifically reserved to non-native teachers, I think we should start there. There's also very, very strange things happen when, for instance, we're looking at textbooks. I've seen a lot of colleagues exclude, referencing or opening an English language textbook or a course book that is not written by an English sounding name. And it's like, oh, but this
Seriously?
is an Italian. Yeah.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah, that happens a lot. It's not only, it's a bias. I mean, I've had it too. I don't want to sound like I've been born into this awareness and suddenly I've had that too. I've also judged people for their foreign accent. Oh, but they don't sound like, oh, listen to that. And then you start distinguishing between accent, pronunciation, and then you start to value and you start to think, okay, this is good. Not sounding the same is actually what the world sounds like, because, it's we really need to check our own biases and say, okay, why do I think this is not good? Or really listen and say, is this person actually making like grammatical mistakes, or am I, do I have this prejudice because I think that they sound wrong and now everything they say is just irrelevant to me because I'm expecting this native speaker level English, so you have to keep it in check all the time. And it's something hard to do, because you're always, I think, as we grow up, we see these things and we see people, kind of twitching their nose and not very happy with the sounds coming out of different ethnicities, and we're to be more accepting, of the variety of what people can sound like, and not stop at what they sound like. This is called, auditory racism. And
I love, there's a name for it. I feel like I've experienced it.
yeah, auditory racism. It's, it's if I say something with a British accent, then automatically it's more important, more relevant, and I hold more power. And if I say it with, I don't know, an Indian accent, then I might, not be. And depending on where you are in the world, the perspective changes and shifts by a lot.
Irony, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm nodding my head vigorously, because even as a non-native French speaker, for example, when I came here to France and I was speaking, and sometimes I would be trying out my French and I knew what I was saying was really correct. I really was sure of it. But I had a neighbor who was just, every time I opened my mouth, he just shut down.
Yeah.
I think it's my accent, or he didn't want to hear it. He was always like, what? And he would turn, what did she say? And, it would be the most simple sentence. So I guess I know what that's like in a way. We all do if we've tried out.
Absolutely. And I have two colleagues I work with. I love them to bits, but, one is English and one is American. And sometimes they speak together and they don't understand each other. And I feel like I have the upper hand because I understand both of them. And I just sit back and watch, how native speakers themselves have trouble figuring it out. And I always say it to them openly. I'm like, I wish I could tape this and show it to people, how this is just not the way to go, because, they are so, they are less I would say, normally monolinguals are less tolerant of ambiguity. And so what happens is that whenever they hear a word pronounced in a way, or it takes them that extra, minute or second, I would say, to kind of, okay, what are you saying? Okay. And then they use their strategies, obviously, to compensate for it. But it's very bizarre that, a lot of people don't see this. Learners don't see it. Students don't see it. And it's important that we really understand that being a native speaker isn't a cure-all, isn't a solution for everything. And there's not really one sound that comes out of a native speaker. There isn't such a thing. Like I
Not
said,
at all. No.
just an ideology. So it was funny, when I speak to native speakers, they often say, oh, I don't feel like I'm not comfortable, or I feel like, I am to blame, or this is it's not about that. It's just about sometimes what comes out of a native speaker's mouth is very much even more important, because it seems like we hold a grudge against, non-native speakers hold a grudge against native speakers, and it's not about that. It's just about equal opportunities.
Yeah. And where did the teaching get thrown out the window? Where is, the fact that can you sit patiently with somebody and guide them through something? Because just because I'm a native speaker may not mean that I have the patience to go through the present and past tense or whatever, it's.
Yeah, all that. I don't know when, but it definitely went out the window, because we are looking for native speakers left, right, and center, like it's a cure-all. And I just had a recent, discussion on Facebook about it with there's a page for Italian people who are looking for jobs and things like that, and people who are looking for teachers. And then there was this trainee teacher who wanted to do a CELTA, and she only wanted to have lessons with a native speaker. And some people went on and said, this is not okay. Or some people said, yeah, I had your same experience. And people think that a non-native cannot take them to a certain level. Some people justified with a preference to a certain pronunciation. But I always say that it's very strange to have a preference, because you don't choose the people you work with. Most of the time, at least, you don't choose the people you encounter, the people you need to do business with, the people you need to communicate with. So it's not like we have a button that we can select the pronunciation or the accent or the voice that we like.
Right.
So having that preference in a teacher and thinking, okay, this is the only thing I want, and I want to emulate, I want to mimic that same exact pronunciation because I'm in love with it. Of course, there's nothing wrong with, you aspire to sound a certain way, etc. I mean, it's a free world. You can want to sound well, but you really need to check, why do you want to sound that specific way? Why aren't you focused on your communicative ability more than how you perceive yourself and what you appreciate so much in others, specifically that particular sound?
Right.
And that's a good question. I think a lot of us should ask themselves, because you see it. Certain accents hold more power. And that's why other students want to aspire to sounding like that, because they see that they are acknowledged more. And so they seek specifically that sound, just because it's
fascinating topic. I've noticed this on the National Public Radio, on the US radio stations. They've really made an effort to have a diversity of, American and English dialect accent, whatever you want to call it. They're native speakers, but they're from all walks of life and all parts of the society. And it's a marked difference. And it's like, wow, I've noticed they've really made an effort on several media forms. So, and it's true. I've had people say, oh, but I don't want to learn American English. Like American English versus Brit. I'm like, or I want to learn American or not. Yeah. There is no difference. It's English.
Which American, which British. Yeah. And, this is the point. We're talking about languages. There is no ownership, but some people and some nations really want to hold on to that ownership, because they want to be seen as, the people who are, the givers and the ones that have, but we're past colonial times. And, even with colonization, every population has taken that language, and since languages evolve, they've made it into something new, something personal. To take that out would be, I think, criminal.
Yeah. It's human nature. If we look at it, I mean, teens do it in their own native language. Every language has a teen kind of jargon, and every generation. It's
oh my God, every classroom has a jargon. There are inside jokes and things create just automatically. Dictionaries get updated all the time. And so to just say, okay, no, we're just going to sound one way and not pay attention to this form, or this is incorrect. And, this has all come from standardization models, which is really another construct yet again. Who is to say what is a standardized form?
Right.
We love rules. We love to say this is American English, this is British English. We love to put things into boxes and people into boxes. But what we do by doing that, we just dismantle the whole idea of what languages do and how they operate and what people are. We think that way. So it's kind of bizarre that we have come to a point where, and also language testing, we have to give an evaluation, and everything then stops to exist in its own right, because we're thinking about evaluation, of finding a way to judge one level against another. And we just lose, I think, perspective of what language does. And really the sole purpose is communication. And we lose that. You can be an excellent communicator with an A2, B1 level.
Yeah.
And we talk about confidence, for instance. A lot of English language teachers are building their students' confidences, and they think that building confidence is like going through crazy vocabulary lists. And it's not what it is. That's not how confidence is built. It's not about how long your vocabulary list is, and how many collocations and how many idiomatic expressions you can use that others won't understand. It's not about that. But
that's right.
This is what gets advertised. Yeah, this is what, if you want to sound like me.
Amazing. But so if we could just go back also to this idea of reputation and how can we change this? From my perspective, I'm working for a company that works with companies, so B2B, and we need to talk to these HR directors and these people who may have this bias, and they may say, well, I want my trainees to be learning. What's your answer to that? How can you educate those potential learners or potential the buyers, so to speak, the people paying for the training?
As a language school, if I had that responsibility and my client wanted native speakers from me, I would first of all educate them, because I think there is great power in saying no. And I know economically speaking or business-wise, this may seem like the worst idea to just say no and refuse a client over it. But our job, firstly, is to educate others, because we are in the education business. And I know it's an industry, and I know there's a lot of money to be made, but the ELT industry needs to say no more frequently and educate others as to what it means to be a teacher, what it means to be a qualified teacher. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people will say, and whoever is listening to this might think, oh, but I've heard a lot of non-native speaker teachers who are terrible, and this was wrong and that was wrong. Well, again, I don't think it's their fault. I think, I can talk about a lot of native speakers who haven't, the minimum requirement for being teachers, and they're doing equally as bad as non-native speaking teachers. So I can say we've seen both, spectrums of this reality. But it's not the individual to blame, rather than, talk about this standardization and the accrediting bodies that give these qualifications to teachers. So I would say, let's stop for a second at that and reflect, why is everyone, or so many people that we deem are inapt to teach, getting those certifications first and foremost? That's because, again, if we take teaching out, and we just think about industry and money, this is where everything goes wrong. It takes a turn for the worst. But that's what happens. That's what happens to our students taking all these tests at every age, at every level, because it's an industry. And that's what happens to teachers looking to qualify themselves and get certification after certification. But then that same certification has less validity for me as a non-native speaker, because I still couldn't find a job. And it has more validity for someone who is a native speaker and could have, let's say, the minimum requirement or none, and still, go ahead. I don't know if I'm making sense here. It's just that I think that the fact that this is a money-making industry, and it's $1 billion, industry, it's what has ruined it for, it's what has given it a bad name. And this is why the ideology is, perpetuated so much in the first place. I think it's easier sometimes to find, well, I wouldn't know what is easier actually to find, native or non-native teachers. What I can say is that definitely non-native teachers can get into the job without a teaching certificate in most cases.
Whereas, and yes, it's true, a native could walk in and just say, I'm willing to try, and someone will give them.
I think it should be made compulsory. I don't think this should, and I started my job as a non-native speaker, perceived as a native speaker without any qualification. So I know firsthand that is what happened. Your sound can simply give, grant you a job without a second question and without any problems. But that's what's wrong. That's what's wrong. And the other part that's wrong is that people who are actually certified don't live up to that certification. And so why are they being given this certification in the first place? And at the same time, why aren't native speakers required to show their proficiency level, to have a certificate in the first place, to show, their background check or all these things?
Right.
They're seen in most countries, and people have said to me, because I'm quite active on social media, that it's like the holy grail is to find a native speaker, or to, they are worshipped. Worshipped is the word mostly, commonly used to describe a native speaker teacher, or a native speaker. I should leave out teacher because you never know if they are or they are.
I don't know. They just may have landed off the plane. But, are these in places where it's hard to get to, hard to travel to, hard to find expats? Is that the realm that we're talking about? Like,
well, there's so many excellent local teachers I know who live in Italy, who were born in Italy, who have studied for, 5 years in their universities, and they have gotten a degree, and, and then done a CELTA and Delta, and they're still insecure because the messaging is out there for everyone to see that, there is a discriminatory practices everywhere. So you end up, either you end up believing those lies that you're not good enough, or you seek to, to find that next level for yourself, to get that higher thing, to qualify yourself as better than, and land those jobs. It's like a rat race, and you're never going to get ahead in any case, because there's always going to be a roadblock.
That is very frustrating. And what a waste for the students. The potential students are missing out on a dedicated, passionate, really excited person who wants to be there.
Yeah.
And that is a real loss for the industry as well.
Definitely is. So to answer your question, we need to say no more frequently and say, hey, why do you prefer? What is your belief about non-native teachers, and have you ever had? And people will say, oh yeah, I've had. Oh, they were terrible. You don't know, just because one teacher was terrible, not mean that the next one will be. And what are you going to? You're going to base your judgment on stereotypes. You're just going to think that a certain nationality is incapable of this or that nationality. And again, your brain might want to suggest those things to you, but you have to stop yourself and say, whoa, wait a minute. Let's see, what qualifications does this teacher have? Or what, I recently went to my son's nursery. He's going to the nursery in Italy. And one of the teachers, during the parent meeting, said, oh, and sometimes, a native speaker comes to speak to the children in English. And that's all he said, because our pronunciation, he says, is terrible, and we wouldn't dare speak, and reassuring, obviously, the parents who were present at that meeting. And I obviously raised my hand. That's what equity advocates do. I said, but are these people actually teachers? And his answer was, well, yeah, of course, we get them from a language school. And I said, well, how do you know? Because a lot of these people hide behind language schools, because they think that because you're contacting a language school, that automatically you are getting yourself a teacher. Well, I happened to work for a language school, and I was not a teacher, and I had told them off the bat, I'm not a teacher. I've never done this before. Are you really going to hire me? And they said, there's no problem.
Yeah.
And I told them that story. I said, well, I would, if I were you, because they are so little, I would love to know who's coming to teach them, just to know if they're actually teachers. I wouldn't want a tourist who doesn't care about children, just, finding ways to make ends meet and just be there for the fun of it, for the experience of it. I want the person to be someone I can trust.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we're so concerned about, what, nutrition and what they're eating and what they're sleeping and who their friends are. And then we don't care the actual teachers that spend the most time with them. We don't care about those little details. And I find it, almost fraudulent.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I'm hearing is that I think you're asking us all to be a little braver, to step up and have those uncomfortable conversations, whether I'm an account manager for a language school and I'm going to face this,
Even if you're just going through CVs and selecting the right person, you're going to find that person who has sent their cover letter and the cover letter says, I'm a native speaker. You educate that person you say, well, listen, this is not how we hire people, and a native speaker is not a qualification, so you do not need to give me that information.
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa, when someone asks you, what nationality are you, in order to give you a teaching job, you say, that's not, it's irrelevant what nationality I am. Why are you asking me this? And get it in writing when they tell you, because we're looking for, well, that's something you can sue a school for and say, you're excluding me for my nationality. That's discriminatory practice. Check.
Amazing. So my last question then is also maybe what are some things that people have said unwittingly, inadvertently, or not realizing that they were offensive? Maybe your colleagues, maybe your native speakers, or so something people say that they don't realize that it's offensive, if I may ask, just so that we get it out there.
Yeah, I think nothing that's really like offensive in a way that is directly, where did you learn your English? Might be a bit like, why would I have to have learned English in an English speaking country? I still don't understand that. You could learn a language anywhere in the world, really. There's just a place. I would say sometimes it's that of, I wish an English person were running this place. I say, well, why not an Armenian person running this place? Why would it have to be? Because it's the English section, so it's the English. So sometimes those kind of things bother me, and I immediately speak up and I say, why do you think a specific nationality is going to be better for this job?
Mm-hmm.
Someone qualified and with experience might be better for this job, but not a specific nationality. Oh, just get a random person of that nationality.
Right.
That thing about the course books really irritates me a lot, because I see that. Or when someone sees like a foreign name or sees my name and doesn't associate it with English, but Meri is spelled that way. I've been asked to change my name or spell it differently because it's Meri. I find those kind of, don't mention your nationality. There you go.
Wow. Yeah.
That has been, don't tell them you're Armenian. Oh, just say that you've lived abroad all your life. Yeah, I find that offensive. That's just
cringy. That's making me feel bad just hearing it. That's awful.
There are little things, little things that add up, and then you find yourself being insecure for being who you are and how you sound, and you say things like, "Oh, I'm Armenian, but I've taught English. Oh, I'm Armenian, but I work in this type of school." Or, but, the contrasting language all the time.
Interesting. Yeah. Gosh. Well, thank you for being so open, because it's not always easy, I think, to talk about these things that could become awkward between people, but I think that's the first step to having change, really.
Yes, definitely. And it starts with us. And if you need more information, please reach out to me at the non-nativespeaker.meri@gmail.com. You can write to me. You can visit my website. I talk about these kind of things all the time. I have recordings for, this issue called Native Speakerism Undone, where I've interviewed a lot of people from different, walks of life and professions.
Mm-hmm.
having to do with the ELT industry. And I have a lot of sessions ready for you to view. Just reach out to me, and there's, a membership you can join and find a way to first find your own voice in this. And then if you want to help out or spread awareness or learn how to address these objections, such as, where are you from? And, non-native speaker is not really what I'm looking for. And find a way to really object to this type of framework or mentality, because you have to speak up about it. Otherwise, there won't be change unless we make the change. Yeah, we be part of the change and educate others. And first step, I think, is finding that self-awareness and security in your own identity before you can do that. And listening to these interviews and the variety of voices really gives you that extra, accountability and energy to know that you're not alone out there, and this is something that is wrongly being put out there for your eyes, but not only, but our students' eyes, our
That's it.
managing director, everyone is seeing this, and they're just repeating it to themselves. I think for most part, they're not even questioning. They're just saying, oh, I'm going to write an ad. What should I put there? Oh, our teachers are native speakers.
Yeah. All fabulous ideas, everyone. So, Meri, thank you so much for your precious time. And I hope to see you again. I think that we have a lot more to talk about. So this is really exciting.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us in the Business Class ESL Breakroom, the podcast designed to bring business English trainers useful ideas, inspiration, and conversation that motivates. See you next time.